The views of this podcast are that of the participants alone and do not reflect the views of the Department of Defense.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. This is Amin Tazi. I direct the Middle East Studies at Marine Corps University and teach there. I've done that so since 2007. And I'll be speaking today a very short commentary on Afghanistan from my own perspective. I would add to all the information we have on Afghanistan and maybe of all the countries and the CENTCOM AOR, Afghanistan may be the one that we have the most information about, basically because we, as a country, United States of America, and our military has been there now for 21 years, longest campaign. You hear this in all different domains of our government, media, everywhere, that this is the longest war in United States history. But there's a sad point of it, and I speak that from a PME perspective. As much as we know about Afghanistan, we have our military there, we have our intelligence centers there, we have an entire U.S. infrastructure. There's so much we still don't know. And that is something that I think as we go along, not just for the sake of our relationship in Afghanistan itself, the region, but for the sake of how we do this. Afghanistan was a conflict that was imposed upon the United States. A group called Al-Qaeda, which we know about, they were not Afghans, but they were in Afghanistan, and they used Afghanistan as a base to launch their attacks of 9/11. That's the only reason we went to Afghanistan. However, once we got to Afghanistan, the mission morphed into what we call in Washington either nation building or state building. And we have to look at that as we move along, whether we are staying there right now. Most likely what would happen is this recording is right now being done in the month of April 2021. But right now there's an agreement from the previous administration that in 1 May, the United States would withdraw. Almost everybody believes that that's not possible, even if the political will was there in Washington. Just logistically, it's impossible to withdraw all of our forces and equipment in an orderly manner by May 1, which is less than a month from right now, what we are talking about. So most likely, the United States will linger on there, but whether this lingering is for a longer period or a shorter period, that's our politicians' decision to make. But what are we going to learn, or what are we doing? Why we went to Afghanistan, and why are we withdrawing? To understand that, Afghanistan never really mattered for the United States. That's a fact. It's an older country in that region. The concept of Afghanistan as a country of Afghans, that's what it means simply. Stan is a suffix in Persian, which means the place of. You can add it in the back of anything. Gulistan, for example, means a garden, a place where there's flower. Bimaristan means a place where there are sick people, i.e. a hospital. Anyway, so Afghanistan simply means the land of the Afghans. The Afghans are an exclusive term, meaning they are the true Afghans, meaning are the Pashtuns, which is, nobody has ever taken a census in Afghanistan, but the Pashtuns are the majority, but they're not an absolute majority, meaning they're not 50%, but numbers fluctuate. They could be 35 to 40% of the population of Afghanistan. The country as we know it today emerged in 1747. The country at one point early on was all actually a mini empire, a regional empire. Afghan sovereignty stretched from what is today Iran and Khorasan province, the city of Mashhad, all the way to the gates of New Delhi. And Afghans did conquer New Delhi. And the country shrunk mainly because of internal squabbles, but also the emergence of the British in India, in Bengal and East India, and there were clashes, and that continued on all the way to the 1880s and what that struggle is called the Great War. The Great Game. My apologies. The reason I'm talking about the Great Game right now is that another great game, and I don't like the term, by the way, the Great Game is misused by historians, but there's a very, very, very good paper by a historian, a British historian, about, his name is Malcolm Yap, about the Great Game and the origins of Great Game. But we leave that. Everybody's using Great Game as this struggle between the Russian Empire and the British Empire over for British defense of India and for Russians' expansion into India and control of what was then known as Soviet Central Asia. And Afghanistan was kind of the clutch between them, if you will. The reason that I'm revisiting that is because of lessons learned. For us within the PME and for us within the military as a whole, we look at what happened beforehand and learn lessons, and hopefully next time we're engaged in a country at any level, whether the engagement is in stabilization, whether the engagement is in full combat, or whether the engagement is in assistance in a disaster, to know that region, to have an experience from the background of that region will make us a better sailor, Marine, or any other individual within the United States military that we are in that country. And as I said, the case of Afghanistan is unique because we have been there for so long. And whatever happens in Afghanistan from 2021 onwards, it will have an American stamp. If it's successful, it has a successful American stamp. If it is a disaster, it will have a disaster that we will carry the burden, whether we like it or not. We cannot say, well, this president or that president did this or that. The United States of America did it. And this is why these operations, these endeavors have to be looked not just by the action on the ground, but what is left behind. What legacy is left behind? Is the Afghanistan of today better than the Afghanistan of 2001, October 7th, when the United States officially launched Operation Enduring Freedom? And these are questions on how we individually and how we as units operate in regions will have an effect. Goes back, and I remember the words of our Marine Commandant, General Krulak, in the famous writings he had about the strategic corporal, that came out from the disasters in Somalia, that even in a very, very low-ranking military units, every individual that is on the ground or interlocking or talking to another side or doing other activities that is part of the military, she or he has a strategic outlook. He has a strategic impact, not outlook, but impact. And therefore, in my view, should have an understanding of the strategic outlook. And a word that I heard from a Navy officer just recently was, when you look at the region such as Afghanistan, we have contested stabilization. Even if stabilization comes in, it's contested by us, our NATO allies, and other partners who are non-NATO, the coalitions. Afghanistan has been a coalition war. We, in some other countries, have done more of the kinetic operations, but when you look at who's been there, NATO has been a very, very full partner. Indeed, actually, to look at Afghanistan in that sense of coalition building and partnership building, it's the only time in the history of the NATO that the collective defense clause, Article 5, was ever invoked. So, but right now there's a contest, even the stabilization is contested between us, between our allies, between the Afghan government, between regional countries. And this is something that I want to end my brief intervention on that. Regional countries here, I mean countries such as Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and some of the Central Asian states. It's also contested by the organizations that we are fighting, what we call the VEOs, the violent extremist organizations. And this is a key as we look at learning about Afghanistan. The Taliban are a VEO as far as the name and that designation suggests, yet at the same time, the Taliban right now are interlocutors at the highest levels. But they are doing some stabilization of their own. They're actually fighting other terrorist organizations, such as the IMU, the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, or the ISKP, the Islamic State in Khorasan province, which actually has gotten them political currency, so they become interlocutors with not our only United States, but with Russia, with China, with others, with Iran even though the Taliban are a Sunni militant organization. And these are things we have to know how this occurs, because that empty space will, as I say, this is ours to be broken or made. After 21 years, we cannot say, okay, well, it just happened, the Afghans are all bad, we are done. Yes, we can be done. I'm not saying we should not be. That's our political decision, and it will be respected. But how it's done and how the message goes, not only to the Afghans, but about Afghanistan, will have ramifications ongoing in CENTCOM's AOR for long periods of time. So that is what we need to know about Afghanistan, how it is, and almost also how we talk about it. There are some among us who don't want to even hear about Afghanistan. It's just been fatigued, which is understandable. Some who just want to say, you know what, it's not ours anymore. But it is. We have been there for 21 years. That is important to understand. And understanding that country makes us better at that. There's a lot of information about Afghanistan. And again, at this point, those who have been deployed on Afghanistan have read some of these from the short little booklets for the pocket. I worked on some of those, two lists of books that have been assigned by different units at different times. And also another thing that I want to say is that if Afghanistan doesn't have a peace, and peace here means a peace that is stable, then we have to look back at the legacy of the 21 years. And God forbid, if Afghanistan again becomes a location from which a internationalist terrorist organization launches attacks, not just against the United States, but against our allies, then we have to look back at this. And last thing, as I said, Afghanistan is, whether we like it or not, becoming already an arena for what we call major power competition, because it happens to have a direct border with China and Iran, and a very proxy border, if you would, with Russia. So three of the main countries that we are, of the four countries that we are worried about, if you look at the five issues, that four countries and one issue that we are concerned with in our defensive strategic outlook, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and terrorism, three of those countries and terrorism are all in Afghanistan. So I urge all of us to not be fatigued, look at this country, go back to some of those information that you have in your libraries and the ships, wherever you are right now. Even if you're afloat, I know there are information there in the libraries and the other podcasts, and learn about it, because whatever decision is made at the top, there will be a transition in Afghanistan. And that transition, is it to more stabilization? Is it more to contested stabilization, or is it to more destabilization? And we need to be prepared as units, and as leaders especially, who engage with those units, or units as we leave the Afghans, what we leave behind, what legacy. With that, I thank you, and I want you all to be safe, and thank you for what you're doing for our country. God bless.